Tonight, we have two individuals who have asked to speak to us during the public participation portion. I would ask Bryan Moss and Catherine Rajwani if you would come forward and have a seat. Welcome.
Thanks.
If you could just introduce yourselves for everyone at home, and we'll have Catherine go first.
Okay, great. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Catherine Rajwani. I reside in Shrewsbury, and I have two children at Spring Street School. I'm an attorney with a background in chemical engineering, and I'm a member of Sustainable Shrewsbury. I'm here today to voice my concern about the proposed installation of artificial turf fields at Shrewsbury High School. While I understand that the proposed artificial turf fields may now have an infill recommendation different than the crumb rubber presented in June, we still have concerns about artificial turf versus natural grass. Sustainable Shrewsbury is hopeful that the committee also plans to evaluate the installation of new natural grass fields. If artificial turf is installed, Shrewsbury will have no choice but to install other artificial turf fields when the first two need to be replaced. Because once plastic replaces natural grass, it kills any living organism in the subsoil, making it impossible without years of soil remediation to grow anything on the surface. A 2014 article in Forbes magazine found that natural grass fields are a bargain when compared to artificial turf due to the huge costs taxpayers get stuck with to maintain and replace artificial fields after their warranties expire. In support, Forbes analyzed nonpartisan studies evaluating the costs of artificial turf versus natural grass. One of the studies cited to in the Forbes article was created for schools and towns evaluating whether to install new natural grass or artificial turf fields. I have copies of the article with me today, referred to as a turf guide, here for your review, if you would like to take a look at them. The turf guide analysis finds that installing a new natural grass field instead of artificial turf can save a school in excess of $1.4 million over 20 years. For two fields, the natural grass savings to Shrewsbury would be almost $3 million over the course of just 20 years. In addition to the significant cost savings, the turf guide cites to player health and safety issues associated with artificial turf. Examples including 1, extreme heat causing dehydration, heat stroke, and blisters on the bottoms of players' feet. 2, more joint injuries, especially knee, ankle, and foot, on artificial turf when compared to players competing on natural grass, especially in contact sports. And 3, overwhelming NFL player preference, because they do polls, I believe, every 2 years, preferring natural grass over artificial turf based on soreness and injury. The turf guide also cites to a 2006 study finding how much a school would need to do in order to offset the carbon footprint of an artificial field. The results were that 1,861 coniferous trees would need to be planted as a carbon offset. With Shrewsbury's two proposed artificial fields, we would need to plant 3,722 trees. In contrast, another cited study found that natural grass does not need a carbon offset. Instead, responsibly managed lawns store significant amounts of carbon, capturing 4 to 7 times more carbon from the air than is produced by lawnmower engines in order to maintain them. The turf guide also contains a list of questions to consider when evaluating artificial turf and natural grass fields. I am hopeful when both alternatives are fully considered and vetted that you will choose to install a new natural grass field. I think this choice would be best for the health and safety of our players. It would demonstrate to our children that we are making responsible choices to maintain and protect our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moss.
Okay, I'm here tonight. Good evening. Thanks for having us. I'm here tonight to voice the concern of many concerned citizens and parents regarding our artificial turf fields in general, regardless of whether the infill will be crumb rubber, sand, Nike grind, cork, etc. Like the school, I wanted to point out though, like the school committee, we are also supportive of the goals that the turf project team is trying to accomplish by renovating and improving the athletics infrastructure. So I think that's one thing I hopefully didn't, if I didn't get it across last time, I want to make sure we're very supportive of those goals. However, of course, there's always a but, we would like to request that the school committee evaluate the option of natural grass. We believe a better solution is to build fields that are properly elevated, properly drained, and that are planted with tough species of grass that don't require pesticides, and that's doable. Artificial turf fields are risky, completely unnecessary, very expensive, and can be avoided. We believe natural grass is the safest and most cost-effective option. Here's an example. Dr. Philip Landrigan, MD, Director of the Children's Environmental Health Center at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, stated, "Grass remains the best option." I'd like to cover the hazards Dr. Landrigan covers that are associated with artificial turf fields. The best documented health hazard is heat. It absorbs enormous amount of solar radiation and it radiates back out in the summer months. 120 to 140 degree temperatures have been measured, approximately 3 to 4 feet above the surface on turf on hot days, precisely at the height where a kid is playing. It's very unhealthy for kids to play vigorous sports in temperatures of the 130, 140 degree temperature range. For example, locally, at the end of August, Framingham High School football team's season is on hold after a bizarre rash of injuries at practice. Several players reportedly suffered blisters after a drill that involved putting their hands on the school's synthetic field, which was apparently very hot. That was at the end of August. And possible heat issue aside, Framingham High's synthetic field is in sorry shape. A source told Fox 25 News it's about 15 years old, and the school has been trying for 3 years to get funds for a replacement. Artificial fields contain various chemical hazards. When using a synthetic turf field and looking out over the expanse of plastic, it's almost impossible not to wonder about the chemicals our children may be exposed to as our kids execute famous slide tackle, pick up the ball that's been rolling across the field, breathing hard at the end of a sprint, or grabbing some water during a timeout. One chemical in the artificial turf industry gained a lot of notoriety about 5 years ago, lead. At that time, the turf industry typically used lead-containing pigments to keep the synthetic blades bright green. Fortunately, through a collaboration with California, that they made the turf company switch to safer non-lead-based pigments, so that's not a concern, as much of a concern anymore. But what's in store for us in the future if we install this? Maybe finding out about hazards down the road, like flame retardants in the turf material and plastics, or silica dust exposure from the turf sand and the infill. The cost of getting rid of them at the end of the warranty, 8 years is the warranty, our town is going to have to pay for the removal of the turf, which is going to be stuck to the local taxpayers. A lot of marketing around artificial turf fields has been very misleading. The companies marketing the fields don't talk about the heat hazards, chemical hazards, and costs associated with dismantling the fields. There are other alternative infills, however, the substitutes have not been, maybe less toxic. However, those alternatives have not been tested for their safety. The best alternative to artificial turf is grass. This month, in fact, the tide is turning, and I want to just give a couple examples before I finish. This month, the FIFA president, I'm not going to say it right, Gianni Infantino, urged an investigation into the carcinogenic properties of crumb rubber and said that on balance, he'd rather FIFA invested the $4 billion set aside for football development over the next 10 years on natural surfaces. And at Ole Miss University, the installation of a natural grass surface has been completed just this summer, replacing what had been an artificial turf field since 2009 and an AstroTurf field the 6 seasons prior to that. Ole Miss in Arkansas, before Ole Miss switched, which would make Arkansas the last school in the Southeastern Conference to play football on artificial surfaces. The rest play on natural surfaces. The Baltimore Ravens just replaced their artificial turf field with natural grass this summer as well. The Ravens ditched the synthetic turf they had used for 13 years, and the initial reviews from players were overwhelmingly positive about the new surface. The grass was phenomenal, their fullback said. I'm very pro-grass. My knees feel better after practice, and there was good traction all night. I love the field running back Terrence West added. It makes the cuts easier, and I like it. So I guess just, you know, given the example that people are starting to rip out these fields and put natural grass in, so we're just here to say we're supportive of the goals to do this. We're supportive of the turf project team goals to raise money and to make improvements at the high school. We're just asking if you could take in natural grass into consideration at this point in the project. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming. We do appreciate the input. It's always helpful. And if you want to give us copies of those, that's great. Thank you.